into a fandom maybe a little bit differently. I used to, when I was in high school, work as a, a game tech in arcades to make money, and so I'd save my money, and every summer I'd go on Fish Tour. You ever heard of the band? Yeah.
You date yourself.
Yes, well, they got back together. And I was the nerdy part of the fandom of the Fish fans. I'd go on their tour, follow them around, and I would be the person in the what they called the taper section with my dad, and my little microphones and talking and trading tapes after the shows. So I did that for a while. This was also during my time where this was the mascot of my university, my undergrad.
Santa Cruz?
Santa Cruz. And so during that time, it was I followed another band and got more into fandoms. For example, one of my favorite places on earth. Anybody know what that is?
Burning Man.
Burning Man. And that's not a real tattoo. It was a Sharpie. But yeah, I love that place. And also during this time, I followed another band, probably went to 300 of their shows, a band nobody has ever heard of, but I helped produce a couple of their albums. And after undergraduate, I got to graduate school, and I was so interested in the groups I belonged to, these fandoms. And I went through the literature looking for what is the psychology of fans. And everything is on sport fans. Everything. And there's maybe one or two on sci-fi fans, but that's it. And so I delved into fandom research, and that's how I got here.
Jeremy?
Go.
No, there are no slides.
Okay, great.
Just make it up.
Good news, no surprises.
I could put slides up, but you wouldn't like them.
Okay. Okay, so I'm Sharon, and typically I study things like identity. So I come from the University of Western Ontario, where I got my PhD, and I'm a neo-Ericksonian by training. Now, if you are already starting to glaze over and get bored, you can understand how I got involved in the fandom. I was doing identity work. I extended that into eating disorders and body image, and then I was working as a project manager on a diabetes evaluation. I do fun things in my other time, like working on team climate inventory analysis. And so I was doing all this, and my life was getting boring, and about last year I decided I needed to become a little bit more interesting. I needed some new stories. And so, I'm one of these people who keep my eyes open for opportunities, and I had a deviance. I teach deviance at the university, and guess who walked in to proctor my exam one day? This guy.
I wasn't wearing the tail for the record.
No, not to that exam. He did it afterwards. But what happened was, I love talking to people. If you've met me at all, you know that I'm a bit of a chatterbox. I think the sign language for that is talks a lot. Which I definitely get that title. So I obviously, when Nuka walked in, I said, "Hey, what do you study?" And he decided to tell me the truth, which
doesn't happen very often.
And I got really excited because now I know I'm going to get a bit of a boo here, but I think you'll be okay. What happened was I had only seen the CSI episode, but I was fascinated. Go ahead, yeah, but I was fascinated by the CSI stuff, and I was really interested with this link to identity, like what's going on with. And I had always wanted to study it, but I had no idea how to penetrate the fandom. So,
well, you obviously have now.
So anyway, I got really excited when he said, "Oh, and I study furries." And I'm like, "You study furries? I'm so excited you study furries." And he said, and I quote, if I may, "I am a furry," and grabbed his collar. And I got really, really excited because this is the first furry I'd ever met. And so we decided, I said, I have an identity measure for my dissertation. I'd love to, get involved in this immediately. And we were, ethics application was happening the next week, and yada, 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 about your uncle, here I am. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun. This is my first con, and I'm having a great time. I can't believe how friendly people are, and I'm really excited to be here. So, looking forward to doing AnthroCon and more stuff. It's pretty good.
And local fun, hopefully.
I need to go back and man the table.
Hi, Steven. Everyone wave to Steven. How many of you have seen me give a talk similar to this before? Fantastic.
No pressure.
No, but awesome. I guess I should sort of mention my credentials, both psychological and furry. I was sort of an unofficial furry since I was like 13, so like 10 years I went around not knowing what furries were. I loved the artwork. I stumbled upon it. Didn't know it was called furry. Didn't know that there was an organized group of furries out there. Just loved the art. And it wasn't until I was almost 22 in university that I was in university, and my friend looked over my shoulder and said, "Oh, you're a furry." Who the hell is one of those? And he points to my desktop and said, "You're a furry." And I'm like, "Oh." Like, I'm a furry too. I'm like, "Oh." And so he want to go meet others. I'm like, "Sure." And so I was taking my first Furmies, and I grabbed a notepad and I just started running around with questions. I just had questions galore. How many of them are there in the world? What are the most popular species? How old are they? How many males and females are there in the fandom? Are they all gay? Is it true? and no one had an answer. I was doing the fandom and no one had an answer. There were no numbers. There was nothing up there, and I was kind of shocked. I said, "Well, how long have you guys been around for?" A few decades at least. I'm like, no one's looked at this. And so from that point, I kind of said, well, I got to find an excuse to do this. And I went to grad school. I said, here's an excuse to do this. So I study video games, video game violence, and furries. And that's sort of what I do. I got my master's degree in social psychology, and I'm currently working towards a PhD in it. So if all goes well, this will be part of my dissertation someday. He's hoping. And yeah, so I stand here both as a social psychologist and as a furry. So I'm the token furry on the team, I guess. So in us together, when our powers combined, we are the International Anthropomorphic Research Project. We call it that because they told us we needed a better title to make people take it seriously. Because we were considering furvey, and yeah, that. We got so many growing, so that like, no, okay. So the International Anthropomorphic Research Project sounds professional. We'll let them believe that. So the plan for today, with this sort of 2-hour sort of marathon panel, is going to be, I'll mention a little bit quickly about who we are, what are we really trying to do here, why psychology and why furries. Really emphasizing, because we get these questions a lot, what are we not, trying to sort of let you know what our intentions are here and why we do this research. Perhaps the bulk of the talk will be what have we found so far. So we've been doing this for 5 years. We've gone to almost a dozen cons by now. What have we learned? Why do we keep doing this? Why should furries care? Q&A section. I want a nice long Q&A session because and the reason this is a 2-hour talk is because usually when this is a 1-hour panel, it ends with about 50 people following me out the door and then congregating outside for the next hour. So I figured I'd let you guys sit in your seats and we do this for an hour afterwards. And then if there's any time afterwards or if people want to hear it for whatever reason, I do have, I can tell stories about funny things that have happened that you'd be surprised when you do research. Funny, the ridiculous things that happen. So I'm sure I've got a few of those. Let's start. So what are we exactly? So we're a group that's specifically studying furries from a psychological perspective. So there have been other, from a scientific psychological perspective. So there have been others who do studies online, but they're not, they haven't gone through an ethics board, they're not approaching it from a theoretical background or perspective. So we're trying to do this this is real science we're trying to do here. So we have we have psychological backgrounds, we're trying to answer psychological questions, and we're using psychologically, scientifically rigorous methodology. So we're trying to do legitimate science here. We have backgrounds in psychology, in sociology, and we have some experience in collecting demographics and information, organizing and statistically analyzing data. And ultimately, we're trying to collect this data sort of for two reasons. So one of the reasons is we're academics, so we'd like to get this research published in peer-reviewed psychological journals. Go to psychology conferences and sort of talk about our research. It's interesting research, and so nothing's better than going to a psychology convention and hearing the really boring topics people are talking about. And then I say, I study furries, and instantly I have a room of psychologists. So that's fun. But also for furries. So we do this research, again, because going back to that first time I was ever at a fur meet, I feel for people both coming into the fandom for the first time and people who've been in it for years. These are questions that they're wondering about, that they everyone has sort of an opinion as to what the fandom is like, but without actually having the numbers, without knowing what we found, is it the case? So we're trying to answer those sorts of things. We make it available for furries, so we come to conventions like these and give talks. We have a website, the International Anthropomorphic Research Project website, where we put all of our data online. We try to make it as transparent as possible to furries. I have a Fur Affinity account, and I try to make my email address as well known as possible so that anyone who emails us and says, have you analyzed this, have you looked at this, I do my best to go through, run the analysis myself and get the answer back to them. So I really try and be really interactive with that and try and help the fandom, because you guys give so much to us whenever you do this, and this is sort of the least we can do. So that's sort of what we are in a nutshell. Why furry and why psychology? Psychology because we are psychologists, it's simple enough. And there's a lot I think furries can tell psychologists about psychology. So there's a number of topics that are sort of relevant to psychology, including Stephen's areas, fandom and fanship you mentioned, so what it's like to be a fan of something. Furries are a perfect example of being a fan of something. My own personal research is on fantasy and the subject of fantasy in people's lives. And so what does it mean, to engage in fantasy? And furry is an example of engaging in fantasy to varying degrees for varying folks. Self-expression, identity formation, that would be Sharon over there. And that would be sort of how a person comes to, self-expression, how a person comes to identify and develop as a person and become sort of a whole integrated sort of person. Intergroup dynamics, so Steve and I talked about this before. How do furries as a group interact with other groups, so Trekkies, with anime fans, Force fans, with other groups. And finally, human-animal relations. That's Dr. Gabassi, who couldn't be here. She studies how people interact with animals, and that's what got her into the research in the first place. So these are sort of the things that are relevant to psychology. And why furries? Well, because I'm a furry. That's a good reason. But also because furries have proven themselves time again to be a really enthusiastic and motivated population. Furries love science. They've been really enthusiastic. I mean, all I have to do is walk up and say, do you like science? And their eyes light up. This is exciting for them. Historical reasons, because Dr. Gabassi sort of got into furries, and this is sort of, she happened to do it and sort of paved the way for the rest of us to be able to do this research. And it's a win-win situation for us. So we get some awesome data, and we get to go to the psychology conferences and be interesting, and hopefully the furry fandom learns a little bit about themselves. So what this is and what it is not. So our furry research here is definitely conducting using empirically validated methods and measures. So we actually use scales developed by psychologists. Those are usually the ones that furries hate. The questions that furries like are the ones that furries come up with themselves. But we have to appease the dry, stodgy psychologists, so we have to put some of those in there as well. Conducted under guidance of an ethics review board, so nothing in this survey or about our methodologies has not gone through an ethics board that said, okay, you can ask this, or no, you can't ask this. So we're trying, they make sure that we're not going to run off and try and screw furries over with this. It's conducted within a psychological framework, so we are psychologists. It's done for the purpose of knowledge acquisition and distribution. So ultimately, we do this research not so we can sit on a big pile of research and keep it for ourselves, but to disseminate it. Disseminate to furries, to the scientific community, hopefully less so to things like Fox News or MTV. Value neutral and not judgmental. So as scientists, we have hypotheses we want to test, but ultimately we try to be objective and not judgmental. So when you see questions on these surveys, it's not with the intent of saying, oh, let's see how screwed up we can make furries look. Or conversely, it's not to say, let's see how shiny and perfect we can make furries look. We're trying to get as accurate a picture of the fandom as possible, for better or worse. Fortunately, it's mostly been for the better, so rest easy. And yeah, hypothesis testing. We're testing hypotheses here. What it is not, oops, I missed my pictures. Yes, those are the kinds of models that we come up with. Hypothesis testing. I had to get my specialist reference in this somehow. We are not sensationalism. We are not here to try and tell a really awesome story about furries. We're not here to go run to the media with the newest and craziest thing that they can put on Fox News. We're not anecdote collection. So we don't just go around and say, well, I know a couple of furries who are like this, and so furries are like that. We try and collect, we do quantitative data, we collect numbers, and that's the sort of thing we work with. We're not trying to be misleading or pressuring, so our goal is not to try and back furries into a corner and make them confess all the guilty, dirty, awful little secrets. We try not to be exclusionary. We try and do it in a bunch of different mediums. So we have an online survey. We have surveys at conventions to try and get as many furries as possible. As you'll see in a second, we've gotten furries from 70 different countries so far. So we're trying to get as many furries as possible in on this. And it's not opinion or agenda pushing. This is not us trying to say, I have an opinion about furries, and now I'm going to find some data to show you how right I am. That's not what this is about. Funny enough, I think it was Bill O'Reilly who actually talked about furries, and it actually wasn't that bad. I was surprised. Fair and balanced indeed. So the data. So I'll start off, I guess, by talking about the data. What have we found? And it's sort of broken down in sections. I'll answer questions about specific data sort of on the fly if it's a quick question. If it's a more in-depth question or if it's a suggestion for what we can look for in the future, I might ask you, if it's not a quick question, to maybe save it to the end just to make sure we get through everything, and then I'd be more than happy to take any suggestions. But if you need clarification for something or something quick, by all means, shout it out or raise your hand. Shout it out because I'm probably blind and won't be able to notice you, but get my attention.
Just a real quick one.
Sure.
Can you give us an example of an ethics board question that they denied? Like, you cannot ask this.
No, I can't, because they've been really good. They actually let us get away with asking about bestiality.
I've been rejected on a couple questions. The PHQ-9, which is a measure of depression, they rejected, I've had 2 ethics boards independently reject me using this, even though it's used in medicine all the time, because it wasn't going to be supervised by a doctor. And the question asked in the last 2 weeks, have you thought about harming yourself or killing yourself? And they said, no way, you can't ask that question.
Because then what would you do if they said they were?
Yeah.
Responsible.
Yeah, so they go through it. They go through it with a fine-tooth comb.
And what are the examples of the hypotheses you're testing?
I can't do it for the ones from this particular con because you're
Understandable.
Yeah. But from a previous one, I did research on dehumanization. For anyone who was at Anthropon and did that survey, I'm really sorry. That was the most hated set of questions that has ever been asked on our survey, because it was long and boring. But essentially what I was looking at was how furries see themselves. So we look at dehumanization. Historically, we find that groups are dehumanized. The Jews were dehumanized in World War II. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be funny to look at a group of people who self-dehumanize? Lo and behold, furries self-dehumanize. Lo and behold, they're the first example of a group who's been dehumanized and don't suffer a self-esteem drop from it. This is the only group of people that's ever...
You're not human. Yay!
So that's an example of the type of hypothesis. So I hypothesized that furries should dehumanize themselves, but it shouldn't affect their self-esteem because it's a part, they're identifying with it. So dehumanization, you can't make a blanket statement about it and say that's always bad. If you identify with it, it's actually not such a bad thing. And I did remember another example of something that was turned down by our ethics board. Well, Kathy and I kind of vetoed it as well when we thought about it. Furries have asked us a lot about autism. Can you ask about autism? Can you ask about autism? Long story short, we can't. The reason being that as soon as we suggest that furries are a potentially clinical population, we have to have clinical psychologists on board, on sort of standby, ready to address the issue if, I might be autistic, but I haven't gone to a clinical psychologist. Crap, now we have to pull in a clinical psychologist. Are you okay? You need to talk about it. When we do research on furries from 70 different countries, this gets prohibitively expensive, especially considering I'm paying for this research mostly out of my own pocket right now. So, yeah. So unfortunately, we can't ask you about that. So ethics didn't like that. But yeah. They allowed us to have the bestiality question on there. I had to explain why, because they were a little concerned about that. This isn't normal. There's no bestiality scale in psychology that I know of. That was new. So.
Congratulations, you have made a contribution.
You're welcome. All right, so the data. The studies that we were talking about are 2 studies in particular. The IARP one, which was last year. It was both at Furry Fiesta last year, so this is data that you guys might have completed in the past. We also did it online. We replicated it online. 4,338 furries and 485 non-furries completed this survey from 68 countries. Oh no, it's actually 69 countries, but I didn't want to put 69 on there because I figured furries would snicker. So, and then the IARP2, which was last year at Anthropon, we just finished analyzing the data from there. So these are the 2 studies that we'll be referencing, and in total, it's about 6,000 furries and almost 1,000 non-furries worth of data that we're able to look at here. And so the findings that we're presenting here are sort of an amalgamation of the 2 of those. Try and answer some questions that furries might find interesting. Am I completely blocking you there? Or?
No, you're good.
So, demographics. So we'll start off with just some sort of demographics, some basic, sort of number rushes here. Furries, the average furry. Now, keep in mind, in our studies, we're not allowed to look at minors. No one under the age of 18. Unfortunately, our ethics board doesn't like that. So, furries who are over 18, the average age of the furry we find here is 23 years old. that is definitely taken with a grain of salt. It's probably closer to 20 years old when you take into account all the minors online. But it suggests that the average furry is relatively young. That said, this is sort of a distribution of age within the fandom. You can see here that 13% of the about 50% of the fandom, and probably much more than that, is less than the age of 21. So we're a very young fandom, age-wise. That said, pardon?
We die young?
I wouldn't be surprised. But, I kid. That said, over the age of 30, you find that there's almost 10% of the fandom is over the age of 30. So that's a non-trivial amount. That's just, that's a decent number of the fandom. So to sit there and classify it as a purely young fandom is incorrect because there are a number of furries who are well over the age of 30, 40, up in their 50s and 60s. I think we've had well over the age of 65 we've had furries answer. So they're out there. Demographics by region. Based on our surveys, just the ones that we were able to give out, they're only English surveys. The vast majority of furries that we've been looking at in these samples today are American. So almost 2/3 of them are American furries. We got a big chunk of Canadian furries, furries from Northwest Europe, so that's countries like Germany and France and UK. We have some Australian furries in this sample. We've had furries from all kinds of countries, though, all 6 continents, not Antarctica. So Africa, we have just a few furries from Africa. Fauna Urbana is a website in Brazil. There's a lot of Brazilian furries who somehow were able to answer in English. But what this means, though, because it's an English survey, is that there's a whole bunch of Japanese furries that we just, until one of us can speak Japanese, we kind of can't. But we're hoping to, as years go on, when we get translations, stuff like that, hopefully we can expand this and look at the Japanese, furry fandom, the Russian furry fandom, and these sorts of things. Demographics, ethnicity. Furries are mostly white. 83% furries, white, and there's a smattering of other ethnicities, so Black, Asian, First Nations, Hispanic, other,
Alien?
There's the other, please specify, and there are a whole bunch of
Dragons.
No. There's a question for that later. So this is just your yeah. So that's ethnicity. So if anyone was wondering, are furries mostly white?
Others like all different types of.
Yeah, it's everything else that sort of doesn't fit here, mixes, that sort of thing.
I do kind of hate to throw like wrench in the kind of working right here, but technically most of the testing has been done in America, hasn't it?
Yeah, and so that's why I say take this with a grain of salt. This is given our limited ability to access other groups and stuff, given our, the fact that the cons we go to are American cons. That said, a lot of this was online too. Most of our sample was online. And we assume online is a little more transnational.
So there is like a good possibility that there's like a giant secret like organization.
Possibly, yeah, it's entirely possible. So take this with a grain of salt. Yeah.
I was going to say, this is mostly about self-identified furries. I mean, if you could, is there like a set of criteria you could use to determine a group is furry, even if it doesn't self-identify?
We use a very, very simple, thank you for asking, I should have mentioned that earlier. The definition of furry for our study is if you think you're a furry, you're a furry. Reason being, because it's really hard. We can't go up to someone and say, you're a furry, trust me. No, I don't know. You're a furry, answer the damn survey. Yeah. So it's the same thing with almost any political orientation, with almost anything else. If you say you're a Democrat, you're a Democrat. If you say you're a Republican, you're a Republican. If you say you're a furry, you're a furry. It's a simple, anything else, anytime we try and get more specific than that, we inevitably exclude some group of the fandom. If we say furries are people who are fans of anthropomorphism, someone will say, well, actually, no, I don't like anthropomorphism, I like some other aspect of it. If we say that furries are people who, believe they're animals, obviously that's a really crappy definition, because I imagine most of you, statistically speaking, do not believe you're animals. That's a bad definition. Anytime you try and get any more specific than that, you leave people out, and that upsets us, so we don't do that. It's a simple answer. Did that answer your question, or?
That's fine.
Great. And if you want to know more, I'll be happy to talk to you afterwards. So recruitment, the vast majority of our participants came from Furry Affinity. This seems to be a really good place to get furries. We also have the Furry News Network, WikiFur. A lot of them find out through friends, Facebook, other places. 4chan, unfortunately, got a hold of our survey. That was the answer, by the way, to any quantitative question is almost always over 9,000. biological sex. Sorry guys, but the fandom is primarily related fandom.
Nothing to be sorry about.
The reason you are seeing two identical pie guys is because these were taken from two different samples. And it's pretty consistent. What can I say? I think it was down to the first decimal point too. Was also the same. So, these are pretty good. These are pretty good, consistent data. Gender. So now, gender and sex are two different things. So biological sex is the waterworks down there. Gender is how you feel inside. It's a social.
I go the only person in the room who just got what you just said. Oh! Waterworks. Okay, I'm sorry. I found fun.
So we ask this question about gender. We give them a continuum. We say 1 to 5. You feel more male. More female. We also give an other option. The other option is not here because it's less than 1% and it doesn't fit well into a continuum. But there is another option, and about 1%, 1.5% of furries don't fit nicely into this continuum. They choose other. But for the most part, you can see that 66% of the fandom identifies as entirely male. You'll notice that 85% of furries are biologically male. This suggests that there is, that's not a continuum. That biological sex is not the same thing as gender. So you can see that there is a huge shifting here, including females are also coming over as well to being, not just entirely female, but also feeling somewhat male. Gender bending. We asked furries about your persona. So okay, you say you're male. What about your persona on this 1 to 5 scale? So on the left here is my persona is the same gender as me. Period. As you go further right, your persona is more different from you, and you find that for at least 38.1% of furries, there's at least some degree of gender bending going on. Their persona is either more male than they are, or more female than they feel that they are. So that's interesting. Okay, so I suggest that for almost half of furries, there's at least a little bit of gender bending going on with their persona. Persona relative to your own gender, yeah. So, what is this? Oh, right. This shows here that for males and females, there's a significant difference. Females are more likely to gender bend than males. So females are a little more likely than males are to have a persona that differs from their current gender.
Which makes it so much harder when you find one's like,
I'm getting to the disappointment. The heartbreak is coming. So yeah, 35 to 48% of furries, depending on which survey we're looking at, report at least a 1-point difference on that 5-point continuum in their persona gender from their own. So yeah, almost half of furries are, there's some gender bending going on. Female furries are more likely than male furries. I'm repeating myself. Education. Furries are decently educated here. So we have a continuum going from some high school all the way over to an advanced degree. And we find that furries have this sort of expected sort of bell curve of different types of degrees. The average furry seems to have at least a little bit of college education of some sort.
Although is this skewed by the...
It is entirely skewed by that. You are correct.
Yeah.
I said keeping in mind all this is with the big quotation marks for furries over 18. Or 18 or over. But does this suggest that furries aren't dummies? These are people who...
The average age is still 21, which is maybe not a full 4-year degree, so...
True. You're right. And that's very likely what's happening here. The fact that it's some college and not advanced degrees is because the average furry is in progress. So, and you see that some college universities actually the highest peak there. 25% of furries are sort of in progress. So, spirituality. This is an interesting one that we get. Are all furries atheists? Or do all furries hate Christians? Actually, no. 50% of furries are agnostic or atheist. So, about 50% of furries are atheist or agnostic. 25%, fully 25% of furries are Christian. So, take it what you will, but stereotyping about what furries are and aren't, keep in mind that 1/4 of us are Christian. We also have 5% are pagan, 4% are other major. If you want to see some really creative answers, ask furries what their religion is, because Flying Spaghetti Monster doesn't even begin to cover.
Great wolf in the sky.
Demographics and family life. I love this picture way too much. So furry asked us one time one of these cons, do furries come from busted families? Is it because the parents are divorced? Is it because something went wrong, they're missing a dad or something. Our statistics suggest that there's nothing wrong with furries' family life. 33.6% of furries have parents who are divorced. This does not differ significantly from the general population. So furries do not come from broken houses. In fact, if you look at the family, or to the breakdown of where furries stand in terms of siblings, 15% of furries are only children. The vast majority of furries who have siblings are oldest children. Then there's a few, not that many are in the middle. And this is for furries, of course, who have more than one sibling we're looking at. And the average furry has 1.7 siblings.
Thank goodness I'm not part of that right there, or I would have skewed up to set 1.8. 10 siblings can really ruin a data.
Not when there's 7,000. You'd be surprised. So, furry statistics. I like silly pictures. This is why we can't have nice things. So, actual statistics, getting on to more furry-related questions that furries might find interesting. Years in the fandom. So, this is taken from both Ethnicon and their online study here. The average furry has been a furry for 7 to 8 years. Okay. The average furry has gotten into or first found out about furry, or first got into furry, identified as a furry, between 16 and 17 years old. And they found the community, so that they sort of integrated into the community, between half a year and 2 years later. This is something really fascinating to me, and I want to tap into this a little more, because it suggests that for a lot of furries, I am a furry, but I'm kind of alone. It takes me almost a year, 2 years to find to find a way to sneak in. And for that year and a half, 2 years, I imagine people in this room probably have stories about that sort of thing, where it's a difficult time. You feel kind of a little weird around people around you, and you don't really have that community to belong to. So this is something we're fascinated in, and hopefully going to look into in the future.
Just a thing to kind of look into on this aspect. It may not necessarily be an alone thing, but you're basically talking about entering the community versus finding out about a community. So it may be they know about the community,
but they haven't found a way to break into it.
Yeah, they're just like, okay, how do I put myself into that community?
Self-preservation for what they do.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah. So these are all good points to consider. Yeah, we're looking. Yeah.
So if you're furry and gay, you get a double shot of that.
Yeah, we're getting sexual orientation.
Yay!
Well, if people are getting into the fandom about age 16, and it's about 2 years later when they
I'm old enough to go to a furry con.
Yeah, you're old enough. You get a little more independence from your parents, and maybe that's what's going on.
That's probably a factor that contributes to it very much. Good point.
Yeah, because I'm the only parent sitting here with my kid.
Or when I entered it, there was no aunts.
Yeah. So moving on from that. This is a question that we get asked a lot. So do furries, I have a lot of time it comes up to people come to me and say, yeah, but I'm not one of those crazy furries who thinks that they're, actually animal or something like that. I'm not one of those ones. We got to be careful how we talk about that, because the data suggests that almost 25% of the fandom considers themselves less than 100% human. This doesn't mean entirely animal, but it means that for 1/4 of us, they think that either I have the spirit of an animal in me, or I'm psychologically there's something more to me than human. We have to stop speaking as if they're like the really rare 1% of us who are crazy. This is a significant chunk of our fandom. We are an inclusive fandom. This is a part of our group that we belong to, whether we like it or not. Don't pass by judgment. This is what these people believe. Yes, and we also asked participants would you be 0% human if you could? So the two sort of separate different questions. Do you think you're less than 100% human? And would you be 0% human if you could? Lo and behold, it's about 50-50 splits. So a lot of furries, half furries would be completely animal if they could, and would half say that they would not. Question here.
I was curious. I was hoping to see the question, do you feel you're more than 100% human?
We asked that one. Yeah, I think it's coming up. I hope so. Yeah. And
so are we considering anthro as no human, or?
All we asked is, do you think you're less than 100% human? We let people decide what that means.
0% human.
Yeah, the 0% I would think is feral.
Whatever people took that to mean.
Whatever.
Yep, whatever it means to people to be 0% human.
I had to help with this question because it felt like human is kind of a binary state. It's like you can't be somewhat an apple.
Yeah. you're entirely correct. It has to do with a little less with biology and a little more with how people represent these concepts in their head. So you're right, biologically, it's kind of a silly question to ask, but in terms of how you organize, here's the human pile, here's the non-human pile. How fluid is that?
It's a very squishy question.
Yeah, it is. Well, human biology. Yes, here's the human. All right, so last survey was a really great one for us because we had a lot of questions about Therians. Therians had been really upset that we kind of neglected them, which is our fault entirely. We knew about Therians, but it's kind of difficult to address them. Yes.
I don't know what Therians is.
All right, neither did we. neither do a lot of people, I think, too. So the definition, I'm going to try and stumble through a definition here, and it will probably be disagreed upon. It's the same thing with furry. There's no good definition of what a furry is. The definition that we're sort of getting empirically here is that a Therian, for whatever reason, be it spiritual, be it psychological, be it whatever, they consider themselves at some aspect to be less than, not entirely human, whether it's human plus something or human mind, with some animal trait in them, less than human, for whatever reason. So it can be spiritual reasons, psychological reasons, but that's sort of the definition we're kind of working with. It's a lot more nuanced than that. There's a lot of different sort of subdivisions of it once you get really nitpicky, but that's sort of the very basic layman's nickel definition of it. I'm hoping no Therian's about to jump out of here.
I've only met one Therian, and she was crazy. That's all I will say.
We're not. No.
She was in the human plus, and she thought she was high and mighty.
Not doing that. Not doing that. So, and to sort of show evidence for the definition that I've just given there, we asked, so the question of, do you consider yourself less than 100% human? Therians were much more likely than furries to say, yes, I consider myself less than 100% human, almost 3 times as likely. Do you consider yourself physically less than 100% human? Therians were 2.5 times more likely to say, yes, I consider myself physically, I'm not 100% human. Mentally, Therians were 2.5 times more likely to say that mentally, I think I'm not entirely human. Would you be 0% human if you could? Therians were almost twice as likely, 1.5 times more likely, to say that yes, I would be completely not human if I could. And this 100%, more than 100% human, so human plus something else, so you're not less human, you're just human plus something. We find that Therians are a little more likely than furries to say, yes, I'm human, and then something else. This has implications. I don't have the data here, but I've looked at it a little bit. This has implications for things like self-esteem and depression. It may be the case that whether or not you consider, if you're a Therian, if you consider yourself less than 100% human, it might be saying something about your self-esteem, how I'm not a complete person, versus say if you're 100% human plus something else, it may be I'm a fully developed person, I'm just plus something else. There's a little bit of evidence to suggest that so far, although we're still looking at the data right now. Do you consider furry to be a choice? So this idea of...
Getting back to the Therians, did you do a religious breakdown of Therians versus furries, if there's any difference?
We can't because we didn't ask those 2 questions in the same survey, so we can't do that.
Okay.
Future survey, hopefully. There may not be a next time for the spirituality question. Yeah, that bothered a bunch of furries, so we may or may not throw it on the next one. Plus, it's a real pain to analyze it. If you're complaining, I have 7,000 responses at any given time to go through and group and lump together. That's a lot, especially when you see that there's 150 questions on some of these surveys. That's a lot. I'm only one person. I do this on my weekends and evenings. No. I like doing it. Okay, so in terms of we asked furry.
They were thinking of having it as a computer terminal input instead of a paper.
We have online versions of this, yeah, and that's been really useful. But we still have open-ended questions. You cannot do a select one of the following for spirituality.
Well, you can have fill in blank type.
Well, we have open-ended, so they type it in whatever they want. But a computer, it's too difficult to parse it. It's too, if it's a typo, it makes it difficult to do this sort of thing. If it's much easier to do it by hand. And I have an army of research assistants that help me and who I pay to do this sort of thing for me sometimes, but I can't really justify it all the time. It's one of those times. Sometimes. Yeah, sometimes. So back to so is furry a choice? So some people say that furry is not a choice. Furry is what I am, and I could not be one if I chose. Others say that furry is definitely a choice. I could put it any time I wanted to. Therians are much more likely than furries to say that furry is not a choice. This isn't something I chose. This is what I am. You couldn't remove me from furry. So they're more likely than furries to say that. Non-furries are much more likely to say, it's a choice, you're in the fandom, you can turn it off whenever you want. So make of it as you will. We asked Furries and Therians about your persona species. How much do you identify with your species? Therians are much more likely, or report higher values, so on a 7-point scale, they say 4.7, compared to Furries who say 3 out of 7. That's how much I identify with my species. So Therians feel much more connected to the species they choose as their persona species, if you even want to call it a choice. Species depth, how much how much a part of you is it? Therians say it's a much deeper part of them than the average furry does. And how much choice do you have over your species? A Therian is more likely than a furry to say that I didn't choose my species. It's what I am. Also with Therians, we asked the question, how much do you agree with the statement that part of me is best expressed by something non-human? Therians are much higher than furries or non-furries to say this. So the idea is that for at least some Therians, this animal part of them is sort of how they express something about themselves. It's something about me just doesn't feel human and it's best expressed as something animal. Therians, if you are a female, you are more likely to be slightly more likely to be Therian. Males are less likely to be Therians. And transgender. That's the point of this slide was. If you're a Therian, you're 3 times more likely than furries to be transgendered. So it might suggest that with fluidity of sexuality may also come fluidity of the species. Therians make up, I kind of did this already, but yeah, if you look at our sample here, Therians make up a decent chunk of our fandom, so it doesn't make, so it's not really a fair thing to just kind of kick them out and say, oh, Therians are those crazy ones and the rest of us are furries, because they make up a chunk of our fandom. Fursuits. So we asked furries about fursuits and fursuit ownership. About 13% of furries say they own a full fursuit. 25% say they own at least a partial fursuit, so that can count as like the head and just some paws, or tail, paws, and head, or something like that. Some combination of head and other things. 10 to 50% of furries say that they never plan to own one. And this is sort of important to say that, a fursuit is not the end goal of furries. It's not that every furry wishes to own a fursuit but can't afford one. It's actually the case that there are a decent number of furries who just want nothing to do with it. I'm sure statistically at least a few of you in here are that way. No interest in a fursuit. 70% of furries own some kind of furry paraphernalia. Anything from collars to badges to a tail, a paw, something like that. 70% of us own something something wearable. So the furry.
That also includes art.
No, that doesn't include art. This is wearable stuff only. Okay. And about 35 to 40% of furries wear it at least occasionally out and about.
Yeah. So the question was that you had on the survey was specifically targeted to wearable paraphernalia?
In the past it was. I don't think. I can't talk about the current one. Read it as you will. Read it as you will and answer it as you will. Self-disclosure. Furries come out. Most furries come out and say that most of their friends know that they're a furry. Almost 40% of furries say that most of my friends know. If you look at this red bar and this green bar, it's a little distressing to see that for most furries, they would say that most of their family does not know they're a furry. So more than half of furries say specifically, no one in my family or my day-to-day life knows that I'm a furry. So this is a little distressing because some of the research has shown that we've done and are hopefully publishing a paper on eventually, has shown that the more you self-disclose, or the more you feel comfortable with self-disclosing, the better off you tend to be. The less you have to hide it to the people around you, the better off you tend to be in terms of self-esteem, in terms of life stress. That doesn't mean, though, run out and tell your parents you're a furry, because what it means is those who are in a situation where they're able to talk about it. There are some cases where self-disclosing would be a bad thing. So. Furry culture. Love Bucktown. Love me some Bucktown. So we asked furries, which of these, so we're really interested last time in how do furries become furries, what makes a furry. And so in this one right here, you notice, sort of the take-home message here is that furries are much more likely to say, than Therians to say that something outside of me sort of brought me into the fandom. Some artwork or a friend or a television show of some sort brought me into the fandom. Versus Therians who are much more likely to say it was something within me. It was something, a feeling I couldn't quite put a word to it, but that's what brought me into the fandom. I was drawn towards it. Yeah. Otherkin? Empirically, we can't find a way to distinguish Therians from Otherkin. but I would be shocked if an Otherkin or a Therian heard me say that, I'm sure. Best as I can figure it out, and take this with a huge grain of salt, Otherkin are Therians who identify with non-existent griffins, dinosaurs, dragons, sort of thing. Griffins, dragons. It's all down from here. So yeah, so Otherkin, as you can tell, is with mythical creatures specifically.
I've heard actually broader than that, including other creatures from mythology. You know, angels, satyrs, centaur, whatever.
Yeah, something you couldn't.
Basically anything that isn't an animal.
Yeah. Yeah,
you to be a Otterkin.
Influences, the top 10 things that got furries into furry. There you go. Disney, I thought Disney would be higher. I thought Disney would be like number 3. That was my hypothesis. Very disappointed.
Surprised Pokemon's not on there.
Pokemon cartoons.
Can you define number 3, please?
That's what we gave. That's what people indicated. We can't interpret it more than that. People said
Feeling inside me last night.
I had a feeling this morning it was called hunger.
Shit, this is a PG panel. Sorry, I didn't hear that. Apologies to any minors in the room. I'm sure you had your ears.
There are minors in the room.
Sorry, folks.
For those of us, when I was like little, like 3 or 4, I would actually nibble on things that you shouldn't nibble on, and I would actually find flavors sort of like a goat would. Like I could feel something inside as a kid, something that wasn't human, but I couldn't explain it or have any attachment to it.
For those of us who are ocularly impaired, like me, could you read them off, please?
Oh, sure, yeah. Sorry. I'm sorry, yes. Please feel free to yell things out like that if you think that's important. Don't let me gloss up something. So yeah, the top 10 influences in order, the most potent ones were the internet, artwork, a feeling inside, cartoons, a specific species, childhood influence, comics, Disney, a specific experience, and a friend. So those are the 10 things that sort of the most frequently cited. In terms of reasons that people sort of stay in the fandom once they're in, a sense of belongingness is by far one of the strongest predictors of why furries are in the fandom, because it gives me a sense of belonging to something. Other popular ones are a sense of escapism, sort of escaping the real world. The real world's kind of boring or it sucks sometimes. Furry's always awesome. Furry's also fun, so entertainment is a very popular reason why. Attention, jury's out on that one. Some furries say definitely about attention, others say that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. So, sex. Split. Depends who you talk to. There's a lot of furries who say absolutely not. Some furries who say definitely. So, depends on what you're talking to. But this is important to say that this is not. There's no stereotype or generalization you can make about the fandom. It's all over the place. You can't say it's one or the other.
I would have to say somebody who's not a furry, like with just the recent my daughter wanting to do this, that I've had more questions from my family or from my friends because they all assume it is a sexual thing.
Yeah. Show them the slide.
I'm just saying that's been my most common question when they're like, "You're taking your daughter to what?"
Yeah.
It's been not.
And this is a good point here to say that this is not neither denying nor confirming. It's just saying, yeah, some furries think about sex. This is an 18 to 25. So mostly males. You do the math. So. I'm actually surprised this is as low as it is.
Have you attempted to adjust the findings for the average person of this demographic?
Yeah.
Average as a whole, as opposed to
And how would this compare to other like science fiction?
We're in the process of collecting that sort of data right now. Actually, we're looking at other.
What con?
Pardon?
What con?
God. Cass is doing. I don't remember when. Cass is going to an anime con. One of our research assistants, Cass. You've probably seen her running around. She's going to an anime con, and we're also going to sporting events, I believe, to collect data as well. A football game of some sorts. You'll see in a moment that furries hate sports. I'll get there. So what is furry culture?
Can I address the mom's question?
Oh, sure.
I was just going to say that one of the reasons that your friends are probably doing that is they've only seen CSI. That's the biggest influence that they've had.
I did have one person say that they had only seen CSI, but two, if you just go to the internet and you type in furry, I see what comes up because I did the same thing. Like,
Never tell people to Google furry.
That kind of contradicts what you're doing here then.
Pardon?
That would indicate like your whole study if you're like, don't tell anybody you're a furry, but yet you want to bring everybody to your family.
Oh, no, I'm saying don't Google furry.
Oh, I thought you said don't tell
Google.
anybody. Like, that doesn't
Yeah, there are better places to find out about our website, for example.
No, I agree with you, but I'm just talking about just the random person that you talk to. If you say, well, my daughter's a furry, well, what is that? They're going to go to the internet and type in furry because they don't know what it is. And then, therefore, you get that information.
Type in what is a furry, you get better results.
And as an academic, so I'm outside of the fandom as a furry. I don't exist in that way, but I am a sociologist, and one of the things that sociologists like to do is dispel myths and stigma and take away, really negative impressions of people, especially when they have to right the wrongs.
I'm in the medical community myself, so that's why I'm standing here listening to this, but it just, I'm just saying that is what the normal person would do.
For the record, I think Wikipedia has, as I recall, it's changed it. Wikipedia has a decent article on furry that's pretty sensational.
Assuming it's not vandalized when you look at it.
I think it's got a semi-lock on it.
Well, I know, but I'm just saying it's
kind of addressing her statements there. I think first and foremost, when you run into situations like that, and this data helps, just present what it is to you first and foremost, and then if they're going to draw their own conclusions after that, that's on them.
But sorry, I was just going to say, as an academic literature, there's one publication from our team. That's incredible for for the thousands and thousands of journals and articles that exist on the things. So we're starting with this, and we're giving it back to the people where it came from first. But the intention is to really make this public knowledge and to really dispute and dispel myths.
I totally agree with you. Please don't take it
that
I'm just...
No. What I'm saying is that I'm hoping that will change in the future, that your friends will have a better, more well-informed and academically situated understanding of what's going on.
It was one of the reasons I went on Nat Geo. We can talk about it afterwards. No hands busy about that now, but yes, the taboo episode.
So that slide, are you trying to say that drama is the smallest component of furry?
That completely shattered my hypothesis. We asked furries. Here's a bunch of different things that might be associated with furry culture. How much do you think it's part of furry culture? Most popular items, things, a sense of community, artwork, conventions, internet groups, local meets, acceptance. Sex wasn't high on there. Drama wasn't high on there. Lies.
They're just loud.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it just suggests what the importance, if you're trying to figure out what is furry, these are the kinds of things to point people to. These are what it tends to be about. Most people tend to agree on that. Furry likes. So on the left side of things, furries really like science fiction. Furries like science fiction, video games, cartoons, webcomics, artwork. Furries love those things. Furries are pretty big on anime, on mucks and role-playing, tabletop gaming. Not so big on sports. Furries are big on sports. Sports are like sports.
Both.
On 1 to 7 scale, all of these things are like 7, 6, 5. Sports are like 2.5. What is what's
It's interesting when you think about it because, what do a lot of sports have as totems? They have animals.
Oh, I'm going to say balls.
PG!
Football is a bit This is now PG-13.
You quote one of my favorite webcomics. Why would you not like something with a whole bunch of men rounding up against each other?
I'm trying to get back down to PG.
Good luck.
Furry subcultures. This is an interesting one. Furry. I had the pleasure of going to a baby fur panel at Fernley Equinox last year because I've spoken to baby furs. I know baby furs, and they said to me that we take a lot of flack in this fandom. I said, well, that's fine because we're a fandom that's all about openness, all about acceptance and tolerance. And I said, maybe it's imagined. Maybe you're just, you sort of think that the furry fandom feels this way about you. And the data here suggests otherwise. So groups that are really well liked, sort of universal among the furry fandom, things like artists, writers, musicians, suitors, gamers, tend to be really well liked among most furries tend to agree that these are a positive source of our positive things in our fandom. Therians like Therians. Therians like Therians more than Otherkin like Otherkins more than Therians. Fetishists are kind of take it or leave it. Werewolves are okay, they're kind of liked by the fandom. Vampires are hated.
I think it's the Twilight effect. I think it's the Twilight effect.
Steampunk liked, awesomely steampunk. Military furs liked. Baby furs are disliked. This suggests that it's not just a matter of, oh, you guys suck it up. You're not actually, you're just kind of making it up. There is a real stigma against a portion of our fandom. You can say whatever reason you want to justify it, but this is for people for whom the experience is very real, that we're not liked by this group that claims to be open and accepting. I'm not going to moralize, not going to say right or wrong. I'm just going to say this is the reality. This is what our fandom is doing to its members. Nazi furs disliked. I'm not saying anything one way or another. Nazi furs. Furs are spoken. I think there's a question back there. Someone has a question.
I was going to see if you could read it, and you did.
Okay, yeah. Sure.
Is there any data collected about like the self-esteem within the hated groups? Like how much do they like themselves?
Ooh. I have self-esteem questions. I haven't looked at that. Good question.
Do you even have a breakdown of the different groups and how many people fit into them?
No, because that would be a really big, complicated question, but it's one that we would like to look into, and we probably will at some point.
Okay.
I can't see sorry, I'm going to get out of the hill here. All right.
The bit where the Therians and Otherkin like each other more so than the furries do made me think of something else that doesn't, I'm not sure it necessarily fits in these graphs right here, but I'm kind of wondering how furries feel about, I guess the best way would be genderqueer people, transgender and stuff.
I suspect that they would be pretty open to it, just from, again, it's anecdote, and I can't throw back on data.
Might be, but I'm just thinking it might be interesting to see how that compares to the Otherkin and Therians.
That's true. I suspect, my hypothesis would be if you threw transgender in here, it'd be pretty high, but something to look at, you're right, and perhaps in a future survey we will. Writers and artists. I'll explain this sort of complicated looking graph. We asked for, we're interested in how many writers, how many artists are in the fandom. So you ask people on a scale of 1 to 7, how much do you consider yourself to be a writer? How much do you consider yourself to be an artist? And we sort of find this, for artists, it's sort of a 40-20-20 split. 40% of the fandom says, I'm definitely not an artist. I suck at art, don't even ask. 20% are kind of, I draw occasionally. And 40% are, I'm definitely an artist. So 40-20-40 splits. Writing is sort of close, it's 50-20-30. 50% definitely not a writer, 20% and 30% are, yeah, I'm a writer. So.
Is this related to furry?
Yeah.
Art? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So. Yeah, furry art, furry writing, yeah. Interactions. How do furries interact with one another? What is the average experience of furries interacting with other furries? 35% of furries attend at least some local meets. Another 25% regularly attend local meets. 25% of furries have never been to a furry convention, and 50% of them attend at least one a year. Keeping in mind that some of our sample was gathered at Anthrocon, so grain of salt, big grain of salt. 80% of furries use online forums to communicate with one another. 40% of them use them daily. 80% of furries use IM programs, instant messaging programs. 55% of them use them daily. And 40% of furries have used IMVU or Second Life at least once. They've used it at least a couple of times. 20% of them use it at least a few times a week. So Second Life is a decent part of our fandom, yes?
So, wait, so just make sure this is how they interact with the furry culture?
With other furries, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you asked about the local meetings, did you ask if there was a local meeting?
No. Or, no, sorry, I think there was something about that. I gotta remember. But good points, yes. That is a really good point. But I mean, the point still stands that for a lot of furries, there are, for local meets, whether they exist or not. They're just not a part of their how they interact with furries. If you're in a small town and there's no local meets, you know, that's not how you interact with furries. And the suggestion, the take-home message from this slide here, is that online is a big part of the life of a lot of furries. They're on that activity with other furries. Species choice. This is my favorite set of slides to go through.
Yay!
Everyone knows something about species. Most popular species.
Husky.
Wolf.
Shepherd.
Banana slug.
Wolf.
Hybrid.
Or hybrid, yes, but the most popular single species is wolf, fox, the dog, big cat, dragon, mythical cat, other, etc., etc., etc. Variant other things. I'll break this down more.
Ferrets? Aw, we need more ferrets.
I'll break this down more. For the record, this was 5,951 species that I had to go through by hand. Wikipedia to find out what the hell some of them were. Oh dear God. Go into mythology and get a mythology degree so you can find what some of them were. I have to do this. Only in the furry fandom would I have to add a column in my species analysis for baked goods. And there was more than one.
Nyan Cat has really changed it, hasn't it?
It's probably gone up since Nyan Cat too. This is a year and a half ago. Among hybrids, most popular hybrid is dog wolf, then fox wolf, then dragon wolf. Basically things with wolves, and then things with foxes. So, but the vast majority were unique hybrids. So the vast majority of furries are hybrids that are their own little hybrid of some sort. Yeah, there are bizarre hybrids out there, like 6, 7, 8 species from 3 different ecospheres. Oh, they're big weirder. I noticed we're not allowed to report data where there was not at least 2 people of that group because then it uniquely identifies them. So if there's a really unique hybrid, we say, oh, it's this, that, and the other thing. And oh, I know who that is. So we cannot put any. So all the things you see here are ones where there are at least 2 of them. And anything else gets lumped under other. I apologize to people in the back. Yeah, I'm sort of reading off the most common ones, and the rest is kind of just other. Most popular dog, husky.
Do it.
Husky, then German Shepherd. Non-specified. About 37% of the furries are dogs. I'm a dog. Big cats. Most popular big cat goes in tiger, lion, snow leopard, cheetah, lynx, white tiger, leopard, cougar, other, etc. But tigers, lions tend to dominate, and snow leopards.
You know what? When I get old, I'm going to be a cougar.
Wait. White question. Writing down
Analyze age and years. That has to. That's my hypothesis. If you're here at Furry Fiesta next year, I will tell you the answer.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought of doing analysis of species then transitioning to other species? Some species seem to be starter species.
Yeah. Starter species.
This dude killed me. You seem like a nice person. I'm sorry
you're subjected to this. It is a good question, though. It is a good question. We wanted to do a longitudinal study at some point where we track people over time in the fandom and see, what changes. So that's probably where we'd address that there.
Hypothesis Fox is the gateway drug.
I'm thinking Fox, Wolf, a couple of these really popular ones tend to be, if you're going to the fandom, well, that's a safe one. You kind of start off in there. And then from there, you say, oh, there's a lot of them. I'm going to be a little more unique. And so if you see a lot of subtyping here going on, where you see for, but there's a lot of them. So I'm not just a wolf, I'm a gray wolf. I'm an Arctic wolf.
There's a book about bears that would suggest exactly what you said. Black foxes
Fox as a transitional gateway. That's not specifically us. Other related groups.
So what was the question?
There's a book called The Magic of Shapeshifting, which is
Okay.
kind of about wearers to a degree, and it says exactly what you said.
Oh, perfect. I'm genius. In which case I'm not.
The correlation, correlation between positive self-esteem to the more uniquely identified furs.
Oh my God, you're killing me. It could be done.
When they leave the bigger group, the safety net of higher, and they go, I'm, what is that, caracol.
Well, you can go like one foster and delete.
Exactly.
Wikipedia. If I had to look it up, you can look it up.
That would need to be analyzed with other things being controlled for. Things like, are you outfitted, are you comfortable? There would be a number of independent factors of it. But it's a great question, like the unique contribution of it.
Right. So, splitting some of these up to Big Cat, mythical, Pokemon. There are more Pokemon in the fandom than Griffins. There are more video game characters in the fandom than shapeshifters, Sergals, unicorns, phoenixes, Digimon, monsters, Minotaur, Naga, whatever the hell that is, aliens, Serpents, Chimera, Kobold, Quetzalcoatl, and
Naga was. Dragons are real. Dragons are real then.
Dragons are their own category.
Naga is a snake. Basically.
All right. I didn't break up dragons this way because it was like 98% other or unspecified and like 2% like black dragon or something. So there's not really a lot to look at. Yes.
Sorry, do you have any data on the species correlating with like social events? So, for example, do more canines, are they more social versus like nagas?
Getting to that. Getting to that.
What is the spelling of that one at the end?
Wolpertinger.
With wings and antlers.
Thank you.
Think jackal-ish.
It's in WoW. Yeah, you can see when you're
Species
drunk.
popularity. Other. What is this other? Custom species. So like 50% of furries in this category report. I just made it up. Other than cow, goat, bull, lemur, primates. I was surprised I found any primates. Pig, plant, boar, pangolin, genet. Those things are so cute. Platypus, sheep, sloth, beaver, civets, I don't remember what that is, elephants, anteater, antelope, chicken, donkey, etc. Other. Species perception. So, the species you choose. People have asked about, are tigers more extroverted, are mice more introverted? I did an analysis, which was a crazy analysis that I loved, where I had people rate their own species and then rate every other species. Lo and behold, people thought their own species was both more masculine and more feminine than every other species. My species is the most sociable. My species is the most fun. My species is the most admirable, and my species is less aggressive than the other species. Didn't matter whether you were a dragon, a cat, a dog, a wolf, a mouse. Your species was the best one. Whatever your species is, Nuka says it's the best one. You're welcome.
Now aggressive are baked goods.
Baked goods are more aggressive.
We don't talk about baked goods. Oh, the average furry has had 2.12 personas in their life. So the average furry has switched their persona at least once. There's some furries out there who switch them more frequently than their underwear.
I have a question about that.
Oh, yeah.
Doesn't say much.
Was that actually a specific question geared towards people who switch their personas?
How many personas have you had in your life?
Okay. Because some people actually have more than one.
More than one. That's true. That is true. That is true. We were criticized on that one last year, and the problem is, again, we only have so much space on a particular, as some of you will attest to, on our surveys. We only have so much space. If we were to keep asking and following up on some of these, it would be
Well, I just wanted, the data to...
Yeah, we don't have the data on that, unfortunately, but that's something that we'd like to.
Well, no, just that you made a statement about changing personas.
That's true. You're right, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not changing as much as... Yeah.
And I'm really interested in that in terms of identity fracture. I'm quite interested in taking almost like a postmodern look at it and analyzing it in theoretical terms to see if that's associated with positive or unhealthy or healthy outcomes.
I've got a question for Dr. Sharon with the identity fracture. Like, for example, I'm Portia's Ghost is my unique identifier in the fandom. I've been that way for, well, almost 2 decades. But how many of us have switched our names more than once or 20 times, and why?
Versus.
Yeah.
Versus.
Yeah, is it different?
Yeah.
Well, that's a really
That's
interesting.
an empirical question. Yeah, we don't have the data, we can't.
Yeah, but that'll be on the list of things.
Yeah, it's on the big, ever-growing list. I'll try to speed up just a little bit, just because I think went over the time that I had allotted for the talk, so we're gonna bear this a little faster. No, we're still fine. We have another 45 minutes to go, but just to make sure I get through everything. Predator or prey? Predator species are much more popular. If you're a Therian, you're even more likely than furries to pick a predator species. If you identify with it, it kind of makes sense that you identify with a strong, powerful species. Many identify with both predator and prey. Those are the pick species that can be both predator and prey. They consider it that way. And many also say, I don't even think about that. It's neither a predator nor prey. So it's kind of all over the board.
Oh God, please let me think.
Yes, so we're recently coming out with a paper right now, or it's in review right now, where we split up sort of the nature of the relationship between, or why you identify with your particular species. And we looked at, for spiritual reasons, because I identify with it, or because I like it. And we find that Therians are much more likely to, again, report more spiritual connection and identifying with their token species than furries. And both of them, I think, was a significant difference, but not by much, where Therians were a little more likely to like their species than furries. But all 3 of these are components, so there's different ways. The idea behind this is that there's a complex myriad of ways that people can sort of associate with their species. It can be, very complicated. Relationships and sex. Sexual orientation, furries versus non-furries. Here we go. Left side is exclusively heterosexual. Right side is exclusively homosexual. Blue bar is non-furry. Red bar is furry. What you see here is that furry fandom has more homosexuals in it than the non-furry fandom. There are almost twice as many exclusively homosexual participants in the furry fandom as there are in the general population, and there is about half as many exclusively straight people in the furry fandom than in the general population. And the rest of it is kind of a mixed bag. That said, for every straight furry out there who complains that, I'm one of the elusive straight furries, you're still in the majority. So, shut up. One of the interesting ones we did as well, we asked participants not only about their own sexual orientation, what's your persona sexual orientation? Red bar is what your persona sexual orientation is. Blue bar is blue bar is your persona sexual orientation. Red bar is yours, not on your persona. And you find, lo and behold, that participants' personas are more bisexual. More bisexual than them. So you find that it suggests that participants who are who are exclusively heterosexual, their persona is a little more bisexual than they are. And if you're exclusively gay, your persona is a little more likely to be more bisexual than you are. We think one of the reasons, and I'm going to get to in a second, we think that part of the reason for this might be, at least for some people, that's sort of like a way of sort of putting your foot in the water and sort of testing the waters. So, it may be unacceptable to come out as being gay, so you can say, I'm not gay, it's my persona that's gay. Hypothesis, we're looking at testing it at some point in the future. For now, that's sort of one of our hypotheses.
Not talking about current surveys, but did you just not leave in data for previous surveys about like pansexual?
Oh, sorry, yes, I should mention that. Again, because this is a continuum, pansexual, asexual don't fit into this continuum. About 1.5% is reported pansexual or asexual. So, gender. The females in the fandom are more likely to be straight than the males in the fandom.
Well, there's a reason for that.
All right. Is this one where I crush everyone's soul? Sexual orientation. What is this? Gender, right? You find that for people who identify as female, they're more likely to be straight. So it's just separating biological sex and gender. It's the same idea. Sex and romance. A few months ago, someone contacted me about a study that was done, or someone did a study or talked about furries, shot their mouth off about furries in Australia and said furries are way more promiscuous than the average. Oh no, sorry, they're trying to say furries have less sex than the average person. Others said this is stupid. Everyone knows that furries have more sex than the average person.
Thank you.
Nuka, what do you think? Oh, great. Through meticulous analysis of the data, I've come to the conclusion furries have a little bit more gay sex than the average proportion, and they have a little less straight sex than the average population. When you average it out, no difference. There are more gay furries in the fandom, that's why there's more gay sex. The end. So yeah, that's, yeah.
And what about during con versus not during con?
This is a PG talk.
You can do some empirical testing.
That green This is where I crush every guy in this room's dream. Well, every straight guy in this room's dreams. Males are 3 times more likely to be single in the fandom than females. Almost 20% of the females in the fandom are single. You're taking it pretty well. Yes.
You get used to it.
The vast majority of males in the fandom are single. The vast majority of females in the fandom are not.
Is this the first survey that you've been asking about, like polyamory versus monogamy?
No, we've asked about that in the past. Typically, it tends to be polyamory is about 4 to 5% of the population. Again, because they don't fit on sort of nice.
Pretty gross.
Oh, polyamorous is on there. Oh, nice.
Oh, it is? I can't.
It's at the bottom.
Yeah, it's in the bottom. Way down the right side. Oh, really? Sorry.
It beats common law just a little bit.
Single, dating, engaged, married, common law, open, polyamorous, other.
Okay.
Give furries a little box to write something in, and they will blow your mind.
No, of course, I'm looking.
I have a question about this one. Did you guys look at any of the data? Because you basically had data that indicated that there were a lot more. There are a lot of homosexuals and heterosexuals. Did you break this down by that continuum as well?
No. I didn't get around to it. There's a lot of data.
Because it would be kind of interesting to see the spike in single males. Is that, do they find that most?
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Which group basically tends to be more single?
That's sort of in the that's one of the analyses to run.
I want to see that one.
You see any kind of analysis between people bringing somebody into the
Thank my question. Or thank my answer. Yes. We don't have any analysis to suggest that, but my hypothesis is that so there's research to show that if it's a primarily male-dominated area, it's really hard for females to break into it. Look at engineering as a field, or STEM science as a field. Females trying to break into these fields, to get into these fields, find it very difficult because there's a norm in place. There's a norm that says, hey, this is kind of a guy's club. With 85% of the fandom being male, that's kind of the case. It's kind of, this is a guy's club. It's really, if you're a female in the fandom, you kind of need an in, way to get your foot in the door. I'm an artist, or I'm, something like that. We think that for that at least some of these females coming into the fandom, it may be the case that they're coming into their boyfriends, or a male friend is sort of leading them into the fandom, something like that. That's a hypothesis. No data support. That's the hypothesis I'm working from so far. Hopefully we'll be able to test. Good question. Yes.
All right. So I was also going to say, is there more single males and females because there's more males than females? So isn't that going to skew it too?
This is the proportion of. So it's this proportion of males of all the males. I mean, it's also I see what you're saying though.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's possible. It's possible.
Do you think that just because it's a big enough gap that it's still?
Yeah, it probably has something to do with it. What it might suggest, and this is sort of the advice I'm saying, is that if you're a male and you're single and you're looking for someone, don't look in the fandom. Be a nice girl.
Corrupt her.
There's a small flaw with that statement. That's assuming that they only date within the community.
Yes.
True.
Because it's possible to be dating someone outside the community. You're dating,
Yeah.
but they're not in the. They're not.
But we're not asking them, are you dating someone in the community? We're asking them, are you single?
No, I'm saying, because he was saying there's a majority of one group, and I'm like, well,
You're right. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. You said that really well. I expect that. Oh, God, the little man's gonna be upset. I kind of was. Personality. Close to the back, therapy cat is concerned. This is me in 5 years. This is me some days that I'm at these cons. Someone comes up and tells me, guess what I do? No. Personality. So personality factors that sort of correlate with aspects of the fandom. It seems to be the case that the more a person was a part, so the more furry you were, the more you partook of furry, the more extroverted you are, the less agreeable you are, and the more open to experience you are. Yes.
I believe we have found the origin of furry drama right here.
You shout louder and you're more of a jerk. PG con. All right. Yeah.
I just, well, that also goes with Ren Fairs, because that's with Ren Fair drama too.
Drama's not a part of the fandom though, we looked at that already. Case closed. Alright, are furries screwed up? Is there something wrong with furries? Are furries maladjusted people? Are they people who are very unhappy? No. Furries compared to non-furries on self-esteem. Right, non-furry. Yeah, keep in mind these are non-furries who were either people who filled out a survey online who knew furries or who were familiar with what furries were, enough so to access it online, or furries at non-furries who are attending cons. So security at cons, people who are around at the hotel at the time of the convention, parents who were sort of with their kids at a con, friends of furries, those sorts of things. That's where the non-furry sample is coming from here. That's what we're comparing to. So no difference in terms of self-esteem, no difference in terms of life satisfaction, no difference in terms of how anxious a person you are.
I was expecting to see like a last one was like, but notice there's a giant difference here.
Seems to be the case. Our research has suggested, using regression analysis and stuff, the more connected, the more a part you are of the fandom, this group of like-minded individuals, the more you feel a sense of belonging to it, the better off you tend to be in terms of life satisfaction and self-esteem. This is a source of self-esteem and happiness for a lot of people. There's a lot of things, this is what I say over and over again, a lot of things make furries unique. Psychological dysfunction is not one of them. We are not broken people. Simple as that.
Yeah.
I thought I was going somewhere. Sure. That's the end of the data blitz. Q&A, and if you guys want me to, I'll tell stories.
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 Story
time.
Now I want to get to the stories, but
no, the Q&A is really important because I should also mention, half of the questions on these surveys come from us as psychologists. Half of them come from things that furries ask us at cons that we look into. So I really do welcome questions. Anything you say, you have data on this, I can analyze it. If we have it, if I don't have it, we'll ask it on an upcoming survey. So I definitely encourage questions before stories. I'll tell stories later.
So I have two questions. The first one is, how exactly do you evaluate self-esteem? Is it their own perception, like, I am this happy, or is it like questions that are geared to evaluate that?
So psychology has a number of really well-validated, through hundreds and hundreds of studies, scales of self-esteem. Addison specifically is referred to as the Rosenberg self-esteem scale, and it's the most famous scale measure of self-esteem. The one we use tends to be called a state self-esteem scale. How do you feel right now? So.
And then the second question is this data, like the raw data, available online for us to peer through?
Not as such, because for ethics reasons we can't, because it's an anonymous survey. What I can do is if you add me on Furry Affinity, or if you get my email address, if you have a question about an analysis, if you say, can you compare this and this group on this measure, I will happily, it might take me a couple days, because I'm getting a PhD. But I will go out and I will run the analysis for you and get back to you with results and say, hey, look, Jason can attest to this. I've done this for him before. So, yeah. Okay. Yes.
I've noticed a lot of fursuiters, they kind of have different colored fur than what the animal they're fursuiting would have.
Yeah.
Is there a study on?
We asked about that. Before. Nothing useful came out of it. It was just kind of we were looking specifically. We didn't look at per color, but we looked specifically at was your character natural colored or was it different colored. That kind of fell apart when what the hell is the natural color of a dragon? It became difficult. So yeah, we tried to look at it in the past. It seems it's one of those things that just doesn't seem to matter as far as we can tell so far. It might matter. It might be pursuing it again in the future. Not high on the list of priorities at the moment, though. What a good question. Who had their hand up next? I think I saw yours.
I had a question about perceptions of the fandom. Is it for attention? How it was basically evenly divided? I was wondering if there's any analysis you can do on what activities are done by the people who may be in the fandom for attention, because I've heard from fursuiters who tell me how much they love the attention, and I've heard from artists who've gotten too much attention and actually vanished.
Damn, we have those two sets of data. They're not in the same study, so we can't, and that's not a bad idea. To look at it. Yes, long story short, I can't look at it. We have the data, but on two different surveys, so it doesn't. We can't analyze it.
You can't do a meta-analysis?
No. I can, but not this way. No, okay. It wouldn't work that way. Let's go at random up here. I don't think you said anything.
Near the end with the psychological, like the anxiety and everything, is that common among any group that identifies itself as a community?
I suspect so.
Not?
I suspect it's the case that when you belong to a community, back up a little bit, humans are sort of inherently have this need to belong to something. We are social beings by their definition. We crave some kind of social interaction. Where we get that social interaction can differ completely. Maybe you just have really close bonds with your family, maybe you have a really close friend, maybe you have a big circle of friends. The point is you belong, you have some sort of belonging to a group. How you fill that glass of need is sort of up to you, and we think that furry is just one way to fill that glass, among many other ways.
Can I look at like medication use or anything about that?
We haven't asked about that. I don't think we'd be allowed to. Interesting, but and we really try to avoid the questions that may be suggestive of, we're looking for some kind of pathology among furries. Again, the evidence doesn't seem to suggest that there's anything wrong with them. The evidence doesn't seem to suggest that furries are broken people. If you start going hunting for it, it might just make furries less likely to answer these questions and say, what are you trying to say about furries? Yes. In the back.
Yeah. I think you're out of time.
I thought this to go to 2.
20 minutes. 10 minutes before the hour we have to wait.
Okay, so I have 20 minutes?
20.
Sweet. You're the man. Right. Yeah.
I've noticed that a good majority of furries are attracted to shiny objects.
The OSD, who's shiny disorder. We got nothing on that right now, mostly because it'd be interesting to look at. And I'm sure I know what furries are, but it's a suggestive question is the problem. As soon as you say, are you attracted to shiny things, there's sort of an expectation, oh, of course I am, because it's a silly stereotype of furry. So we could ask it, I can probably tell you what the answer would be, and it probably wouldn't be, we wouldn't really gain anything out of it.
Yeah, but it would be fun.
It'd be funny. I completely agree. Unfortunately, we've got a huge list of questions to ask that we'd like to ask, and that would be much lower on the list.
It's also a thing you find in a lot of other fandoms as well.
Yeah.
Furries and furries, and especially furries, are really attracted to squeakers.
I'm gonna say the same thing as well. Shiny things, squeaky things, jangly things. I suspect, again, we could ask the question, but we probably wouldn't get much out of it just because we're pretty sure we know the answer to that. So, and it's hard to convince our ethics board. This is an important question for psychology. We need to know this.
In the bachelor.
Yeah. I idea, and maybe already look at it because you mentioned something like identity fracturing or something like that. And I was thinking it might be interesting to observe the kind of look at the identity issues involved with the whole concept of the persona, because not only do furries as a general rule have a literal alter ego that they may identify with more or less, but it's also an identity that we all have to consciously construct at some level, even if it's the starter persona theory of someone asks you what your persona is, like I'm a fox. Even then you still have to think that, and I'm thinking there might be something interesting.
Do you have a hypothesis specifically that we could test, or?
I'm not.
I agree that there might be something there, but I'm not sure what specifically.
I'm thinking that there might be some kind of. I honestly don't know enough about how people construct identities to actually create a meaningful hypothesis out of this.
If you'd like, I can talk to you a little bit after the talk about this, because I can talk to you off about this. If you'd like, come find me afterwards, and I can chat with you about that.
Yeah, we can hash out some ideas there.
Who hasn't asked a question yet, just so I can make sure everyone.
Introverts and extroverts, whether there's a difference between inside the fandom or outside, whether they shift going from a con going back to their day-to-day life. Is there any difference between them being extrovert and introverted?
That's a good question.
We haven't asked. Yeah, it's a good question. I haven't looked at them at con versus not at con.
Furry versus non-furry interaction.
That's a really good one too.
We're also interested
Introverted in non-furry situations, but extrovert in furry situations.
I suspect I can answer that one just with sort of past research, just showing that if you're in an environment where you feel comfortable, and I'm a very shy person, but because we're talking about something I know and I'm pretty good at, I'm extroverted. As soon as if I was up here giving a talk about gynecology.
You can point at me and say gynecology.
I pointed at random.
Would you like to throw
Here, it's heavy. It's heavy.
I do bad under pressure. Who else hasn't asked a question?
About the singles, what furries that are single. Because I know I've met a lot of furries that are, they say they won't date outside the fandom. They won't date anyone who's not furry because that usually ends up turning out very badly.
Yeah.
Did you all ask any kind of questions like that?
Didn't ask anything about that. I suspect there's probably something to that. The things that predict relationships going really well are things like being compatible on level of intellectualism, being compatible in terms of religious orientation is a pretty good one if you're.
Yeah, I can answer this sociologically. In terms of demographics, typically the only marriage difference is in age. People marry slightly older people or younger people than what they are, but you'll find on education, on race, on religion, people are typically matched on most of these things. I would be surprised to find.
So if furry is a really important part of your life, and you're going to someone who's not a furry, it's conceivable that they'll go into furry, but chances are if they don't see it the same way you do, or if they don't take it as seriously as you do, that's probably going to cause some friction in the relationship, and that's something that can lead to sort of disaster.
You also had a slide up earlier in there that kind of explains why it doesn't always work when you're dating outside the fandom as well. And that was the issue of disclosure.
Yeah. A lot of furries have a difficult time disclosing these sorts of things. If you're trying to keep it from your partner, that's definitely something that can shoot you in the foot. A lot of furries just don't feel comfortable. I mean, furry's kind of a safe spot for a lot of us. It's a safe place where you can be yourselves. Outside of that is really risky, and you really have to straddle that line between how much do I want to tell these people? Am I comfortable having to confess this to a person who doesn't already know this about me? In the back. Right.
Have you or can you compare this to studies in other subcommunities?
We're in the process of doing it. Currently, we are running a study, as I mentioned, in the anime community and with sports fans. I would also like to expand it to other types of fandoms as well eventually in the future. I think we're getting a grant, hopefully, or we're applying for a grant.
We have applied for a grant, for $67,000 to do.
So the Canadian government can finance this, hopefully.
Yes. Taxpayers, we pay a lot of tax in Canada.
I would love to get my fursuit paid for by the community. Yes, I think verification.
Have you asked questions relating furries to the career paths they are in or plan to go into?
Yeah. Someone asked this last year, I think, perhaps. We looked into it. And we have found, we had a code look at it. We're still in the process of analyzing it. Big sort of keywords and sort of search terms and looking at what furries do for a career, what their sorts of fields are. Anything involving graphics or arts, science degrees, particularly technology and IT degrees. Anything involving a computer, furries tend to be really highly represented in there. A little bit psychology. Those tend to be the big ones, and there's a few accountants, which is kind of surprising.
Someone has to pay for this.
But those are the big ones. Computers, graphics design, those sorts of things tend to be really a real big draw for furries, and they tend to lead to careers in IT, computing science.
The internet's a big part of
Oh, natural sciences too, biology and physics. In the back.
I was just going to comment for the study that you're trying to get funded. If furries make personas and the two communities that you're looking at don't make personas, so you might want to look at something like the SCA, where you actually make a persona and do it in the same detailed way that you make.
Sorry, SCA, the acronym escaped me.
Society for Cultural Activism.
Or a little bit like.
They're the people
Ren fairs.
Ren fair.
Right. Okay. Sorry. Yes, we have actually contemplated looking into them. They're difficult to find. I know they exist. Around where I live, they're difficult to find. But yes, we have looked into them, and it's still on our to-do list. That's definitely one we want to look. And for that's a really good reason why. For that very reason.
What is this?
Society for
Creative
Anachronism.
Yeah. Medieval fair reenactments.
If any of you watch read Lee's new webcomic, they quite literally just talked about the SCA.
I've heard countless jokes about this in place, which probably makes people angry. But I've heard countless jokes about how sexually active foxes are.
No evidence. No, species doesn't predict person sexuality. But that said, foxes were a little more straight. Yes. Yes.
It's a butterfly ballot, I tell you.
Unimaginably old, 36. I would be curious to know how people's needs, the roles they fill, the needs they meet, change as they become like gray muzzles and as they get older in the community.
You're interested in this in particular.
Yeah. So
my partner's older.
Yeah. So when you're younger, especially, furry community fulfills all kinds of needs, social needs for a person. How do those needs change as the person becomes older, goes into becoming a gray muzzle and such? How do those needs change?
And what do you do in the community? Because my identity is different in relationship to other people too.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know the answer for this for sure, but what I hypothesize will be the case is that the furry fandom is actually extraordinarily functional for young people as they're making the transition into adulthood. In fact, the very, very, very preliminary data that we have that looks at different levels of identity says that furries actually have a higher degree of social identity resolution than non-furries, using the limited sample that we have right now. So this is one of the things that we're going to continue to study at Anthrocon and keep going. I would expect... I expect, though, that, and again, this is just hypothesizing based on the theory, that as people transition and have a stronger sense of identity, that will help resolve things like a personal sense of identity and an ego identity, which I think eventually will release some of that social identity in the furry fandom community. So I think that as people move through, you'll see more people dropping off because they've used this in a functional, adaptive way to sort of make their complete transitions into adulthood. So that's what I think, anyway, at this point.
Yeah, I'd like to see more data on the idea of that period of time where you're into furry stuff, but you don't even know what a furry is. You've never seen the furry art pages or any of that stuff. And the time you find that, and then you actually start getting involved with the group.
Part of our problem is that we'd love to nip that in the bud, but the average age of that is 16 to 18, and that's under our age of 18. We're trying to find ways around that right now. We're actually talking to our ethics board about the idea of.
But I mean, I remember what things were like back before, you know.
It's risky though. It is risky trusting on retroactive memory. It's really, really.
Yeah.
People, we have biases to remember the past as either more rosy than it was before, or worse than it was, and I've grown since then.
And if you ask people at this stage who are still in the fandom, there's going to be a selection bias for those who stay, as opposed to those who went off and did something else.
So we're looking into ways though to be able to actually hopefully access people who are younger in the fandom, and so see as it's happening kind of thing, as you're first stepping into the community.
Well, you do have that degree there where basically they only have about a year between the time period they find furry and then they actually come out to the con. So if you catch those people, it's a very short time period for them.
We're actually hoping to do a longitudinal study, which is where we measure a group of people, we get their data at one point, and then we give them a number so that we can track them. And 6 months later, come back to them and say, here, fill out another survey, use their numbers so we can say, okay, this was this person 6 months ago. 6 months later, do it again and track them over time, especially if we can get furries just as they're coming in and see things like maybe they start off straight and gradually push towards bisexuality as they go into the fandom for longer. Maybe they become more open to experience as time goes on. We're really stoked about this and we're working on it. We're trying to figure out the logistics of it right now. But that's sort of our the thing we'd love to be doing in the next year or so. That's what we're hoping. If we're giving this talk next year at Furry Fiesta, hopefully we'll be talking about either having started it or recruiting some of you to do it. So it's open. Yes.
Can you, in a very PG way, address the big stigma of bestiality?
I
can hit that.
I will say, I've answered this before, we don't have a lot of data on it, but the data that does exist suggests there is a slightly higher proportion of zoophilia in the furry fandom than there is in the general population. I will compare that with another statistic that says there's a higher proportion of necrophilia among morticians in their career. The reason I make this comparison, if you're a necrophiliac, a mortician is a great career for you. If you're a zoophile, you will find like-minded, or what you think are like-minded folks in the furry community. I don't believe the furry community makes zoophiles. I believe that zoophiles finds the furry community.
Could it be that it's a little bit like, if you, and forgive me, this may be a bad comparison, but if you stop smoking, you may like to be around smokers because it helps you kind of get through the anxiety of that issue?
It's possible. I'm not sure what the psychology of it would be. We don't have a lot of data to suggest it. My impression, just in the case, to state quite explicitly, I don't believe the fandom makes zoophiles. I believe that person who has zoophilic tendencies would be drawn to the furry community.
Also, there's a fairly high correlation between gay and philia. These things have a stronger tendency to go together. Gays do tend to express in ways that are not necessarily compatible with the rest of them.
I don't know the data on that one, so I'm not.
That's Kinsey, and I'm not sure it's really.
Yeah, Kinsey is 50 years old. I love Kinsey.
But there are other studies that kind of support this too.
Yeah. All right. Yes.
In your studies, it sounds like you're probably going to do it in future studies, but are you going to look at those specific subgroups that may not consider, some of them may not consider themselves part of the community but overlap, like zoophiles or Therians or non-furs that
We've looked at Therians. We've kind of done Therians. I'm not sure if we're going to do a lot more on them just because the problem is if we have a huge, if we have a 100-question survey and we spend 30 questions talking about Therians who make up about 25% of the fandom, the other 75% goes, well, what the hell was that survey about? Are we, if I ask 50 questions about bestiality, first of all, if you're not into it, you're going to be like, what the hell was that about? Second of all, and that's the vast majority of first, second of all, you're going to be insulted. You're like, what the hell are you trying to find? What are you, and we get that. We get people who are very offended if we, even asking a couple of questions about, homosexuality and sexual orientation, are very offended. They say, are you trying to say that all furries are gay? And so we really have to watch that line between, and we're really careful about it because all it takes is one bad survey, one poorly worded question to make it onto Furry News Network or to make it across the internet. And suddenly we're something where people who are trying to put a black mark on furries. So we have to be really careful with those sorts of issues.
Just to add to that, like you were talking about trying to find people who are getting into the furry fandom early on. When you do like the non-furs, do you ask questions like, what now that we've told you about this, like what's your level of interest in this?
The non-furs tend to be the non-furs people who know what furries are.
Oh, okay.
The reason being that it doesn't
Like if
do
you
us
do
a
the
lot of
sport
good.
event.
Pardon?
It's like if you do the sport event and then you find people who are like, hey, yeah, I am kind of interested in
Yeah,
it.
the typically people
I've
go
never
into
been
cons with their friends who are furries. So, and the reason being, Kathy used to do studies on university undergrad and say, so what do you think of furries? And 90% of the results were, what the hell's a furry? It doesn't help us very much. So we really straddle this line between trying to figure out and trying to find a control group that knows what a furry is. And the problem is we can't define a furry, because as soon as we define a furry, we've biased the research. Now they're working from our definition of what a furry is. So they need to know what a furry is, not be a furry, and be easily accessible. Suggestions.
Actually, anime conventions, a lot of people there know them because they.
A lot of them also hate furries.
That's the problem, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But they do know what they are.
But we are actually doing that at an anime convention. We're asking them about furries. So we are doing that. Yes.
Do you know if there's any connection between a person who has owned like an animal, like a cat, or are they more like aimed towards having a cat persona, or like? Because I've raised goats, and my persona is a goat.
I'm not going to answer that because questions similar to that may appear on surveys in the future. Varying degrees in the future. I have time for one last question.
Just real quick, have you tried gaming conventions?
I'm giving a talk at a gaming convention in a short while, actually.
Is it about furries?
Yeah. Actually, no, sorry. Kathy's doing the one on furries. I'm doing the one on video game violence. But I will show up in my fursuit at Kathy's talk. Kathy doesn't know. Warning. Right. So, if folks want, so we're getting through out of here. But I'll wander around out there, and if folks want to talk to me, feel free. I'm really approachable. If you got somewhere to be, thank you for taking 2 hours. I will be around at the table up there all weekend. If you see me around in the evenings, I'll probably be playing werewolves and stuff. Feel free to chat me up. Thanks so much, guys.